One of the craziest years ever. It is so great to see all of you. And I'd like to thank the Storytelling Association of California for their Zoom and their support of this event. I'd also like to thank Colleen Nunn and Dana Gross, who co-chaired this event with me, along with Tim McCaffrey of Yosemite Design, for putting together the incredible postcard for our event. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome all of you to TELLABRATION. Now, a little backstory about what is TELLABRATION for those of you who this might be the first time you've ever telebrated. TELLABRATION started in 1988 by storyteller J.G. Pinkerton. He said he dreamed of having a night when storytelling could be happening all over the world. He wanted a way for communities to get together and share stories. And that's exactly what we're doing. And so I would like to now read the oath of TELLABRATION, which is the way all telebrations all over the world get started. So here we go. In the name of storytelling, the National Storytelling Network and the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild and community storytellers, we are proud to sponsor TELLABRATION, the worldwide event of storytelling. At this very moment, across 6 continents in 40 states and 9 countries, from Sacramento to Savannah, Boise to Barcelona, West Virginia to the West Indies, Los Angeles to Lithuania, over 300 audiences are gathered for this spectacular storytelling event. Try saying that word, spectacular. And without further delay, in joy and in anticipation, let the stories begin. So this evening, I'd like to welcome our first storyteller that I met in Community Storytellers over 30 years ago. One of the beauties of virtual storytelling is that you can welcome back storytellers who have moved away. And so it is with our first storyteller, Penny Post, who's going to be Zooming to us live from Massachusetts. She's going to be telling a story called Rock Solid. Now, I've asked all of our storytellers to share with us something that they've learned during Zoom. And she said she learned how to get around her new community in Massachusetts. So please, without further delay, help me welcome Penny Post.
Hi there. This is the first time I've done storytelling on Zoom myself. When I moved to this community, I found that 15 years ago, the management company that wanted to build on it bought a quarry in Hingham, Massachusetts. But when they started to threaten to take out the bulldozers, the town of Hingham said, no, why don't you build on top of the quarry instead of changing it? And so this community has 9 buildings. They're all at different levels, and they're all surrounded by lots of rocky outcroppings. And this is my love poem to that. The wind is always in a hurry, boldly shaking trees from crown to root. Fauna and flora scurry through the underbrush while waves crashing on indifferent rocks 100 yards away and down laugh up at lupin waving in the fields above. Wind and water rhythms play on top of rocks, but rocks are never in a hurry. Underneath and pushing up, relentless in their ever-presentness, those rocks don't go away. They are indomitably there, relentless in their ever-presentness. They caress my essence and will take me back, absorb my earthly substance eventually. A harsh embrace when I'm ready to return to land as dust, no longer on the rocks, but of them. My love poem to Linden Ponds. I can't hear you, Karen.
Karen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So first of all, thank you, Penny, for that rock solid poem. I was so exuberant about introducing you and letting folks know how long we've known each other that I failed to mention that you are also a recovering Toastmaster who has always rejoiced in bringing storytelling into the corporate world by way of Coyote and Nancy and the Hoja. So this is just another way that you bring amazing spoken word into the world. And I want to thank you for your beautiful poem. Thank you, Penny. So let's give Penny a hand and a round of applause. And now I'd like to welcome another storyteller who comes from Los Angeles. I've known her almost as long as Penny, about 30 years. And Elena Beth said that she began storytelling when she was a child. She made up a scary story for her Girl Scout campmates and she got hooked. And now she's been telling both folktales and personal stories for decades. I asked her what her favorite skill was that she learned during COVID, and she said she learned how to have fun with Snapchat filters in Zoom. Actually, she turned me on to those Snapchat filters as well. So please help me welcome Elena Beth telling The Dream House.
Hi, everybody. I'll take 2 seconds just to show you, like, here's an example of one. And here's one of my favorites that I used this month. So back to this, which is a filter. I didn't have to put on mascara or anything. Okay. The Dream House. There was a woman named Mrs. Butler who lived in Ireland, as happy as you could be. She was very nice looking. She had a family, a nice house. She was prosperous. Everything was as good as it could be, she thought. One morning, she came into the kitchen and told everyone who was there, I have had the most beautiful dream. You want to hear it? Just let me tell you. And she began to tell them about a house that she had been to in her dream that was just the most perfect house that she could even imagine. Not too big, not like a palace, but everything you could possibly want. And everyone smiled and nodded, and that was the end of it. Until the next morning, when she said, can you believe this? I dreamed of my house again. And I looked through it even further. Do you know there is a library just filled floor to ceiling with every book you could ever want to read, and a conservatory, beautiful garden room, the light shining in. And she went on, and again they smiled and they nodded, but tried to change the subject fairly soon. The next morning, I dreamt of my house again. And even more did I look. Oh, through every room. Do you know the bedroom has a red velvet canopy bed that anybody would want to just spend time in, with a fireplace right nearby? And she started to give detail after detail until people started to interrupt her a little bit and say, oh, this breakfast food is wonderful, isn't it? She did try again the next day when she dreamed again, but she could tell no one really was interested anymore, so she kept it to herself. But she kept dreaming of the house. It began to be that she couldn't even wait for bedtime. She would go to bed just a little bit earlier every night to be able to enjoy this house. As she walked through it, sometimes she'd even see people, but they didn't seem to want to speak to her either, and she figured, well, this is just like in real life. Things started to get a little bit different outside the house. There were riots in other places in Ireland, and then they seemed to get closer. There were sounds that you didn't know if it was a tire or a bomb, but none of that was as bad as birdsong being replaced by sirens, or neighbors not acting like neighbors anymore, but division. She didn't want to be near, so every day earlier and earlier to bed. She didn't even want to eat dinner. She started to get gaunt, ghost-like, just frail. But she was happy when she dreamed of her house. At one point, the dream stopped. And then she had nothing. After about 6 months of her still being gaunt and with no smiles even showing, her husband thought, there's no reason for us to stay here. This is not what we were in Ireland for. And he decided to move them to England. And they sent for lists of houses upon houses all around London. But whenever they would look at a house, she would look for a moment and go, it's not my house. So they started to look further afield. Finally, Hampshire, it's expensive, but maybe there'd be a tiny house. And as they were driving along, her eyes opened up wide and she said, stop, stop. And she was pointing at a house that was indeed for sale. And they started to drive up, and the husband said, well, this house is not very large. Maybe we can afford it then. She said, no, that's not the house. That's the gatehouse. Keep going, keep going. And they went further. He said, oh, that's the house. No, that's the stables. And they went further. That's that. No, it's the guest house. Keep going, keep going. I know this. And they kept going. And then there was the house. She had an energy that she never had before. She leapt to the door when the housekeeper opened it. She said, I know this is going to sound very strange, but may I show you the house? The housekeeper had no problem with that. And Mrs. Butler brought her husband. Look, 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 if we go this way, that's where the library is. And if we go this way, she knew where every single thing was, except for one odd door that was built halfway up the stairs. She said to the housekeeper, this door doesn't belong in my house. Well, I don't know what your house is, ma'am, but this door was put there about 6 weeks ago when I started working here. They accepted the offer that was given to them, which was nothing. They very quickly were able to make a deal, cash down, buy the house. Mr. Butler had not seen his wife so filled with life in ages that he worried. It didn't make any sense. How could a house of this caliber, this large, how could it be something that they could afford? Once everything was signed and sealed, he went with Mrs. Butler to find the house agent for that house. And when they went into the office, the man moved away from them, and then collected himself. And they explained, this is the house that we bought. We don't understand. I guess there can be no problem, my dears, in telling you now that you have paid, you can't back out. The house has a reputation for being haunted. But, madam, you, my dear, you have no reason to be under any apprehension because you are the ghost.
Ooh. Now I'm just wondering, is that bed behind you real, or is that part of the ghostly
It's part of the
adventure?
ghostly. I wanted to have an Irish-ish bed that she might have gone back to.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that ghostly tale. I'd like to also announce to everyone that if you would like to make a donation to our concert this evening, you will find information in the chat regarding how to make that donation to the Storytelling Association of California or the National Storytelling Network. And now, without further delay, I'd like to bring up our next storyteller, who comes from up north, at least up north from where I live. She comes from the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild. Kathy Martinez says she's been interested in storytelling for over 30 years, and she had an after-school storytelling club called the Tattletale Storytelling Club of Calaveras County. But unfortunately, COVID put that to an end. But one of the things she did learn to value during these strange COVID times was how much she enjoyed her storytelling friends and community. So without further delay, please help me welcome Kathy Martinez in her story, Cutting Apricots.
Hi. That's interesting. You call it apricots. I say apricots. Just FYI.
I'm from Michigan.
Well, it's apricots for us. My story happened about actually early 60s. I was in 8th grade, and I am one of 5 kids. There's my brother Fred and Diane, Loretta, Kathy, me, who's 4th, and my sister Jessie. And my mom worked full-time. My dad worked full-time. She came home. She did all the housework, the cooking and the cleaning, as well as working 8 hours a day and manning 5 kids. As a result of that, I think one of the reasons for that, she was always tired. She never had time for anything. On top of that, as a child, she was removed from her home and put into Stewart Indian School in Nevada. Since at an early age, she was 8, and she stayed there until she was almost 15. As a result of that, she was not shown any affection. As a result, we never got any affection. She never said she loved us. She never says that she cared. She never touched us. She never hugged us. She never put her arm around us. She never held our hands. She never said goodnight. She yelled a lot, but she was a busy, busy woman, always tired with 5 kids running around. And one of the things she did is if we got hurt, we were on our own. I think maybe once or twice she put a Band-Aid on my knee. I had polio as a child, so I fell a lot. At one time, I had 27 bleeding scars on my knees, and she never helped me. The person who helped me was my older brother, Fred, and he was the one that took care of me. But Mom, no, if we were sick, like a tummy ache or something like that, we were on our own. She would say, I can't help you, and she would not come near us. One day, our neighbor, Mrs. White, happened to be at the house while I'm getting sick in the bathroom, and she came in, and she helped me. I was faint, and she put her arm around my stomach and held me up while I dropped all over the bathroom and the toilet and everything. And she carried me in the bed. I was blown away by that. I said, why are you doing this? You know, it was just, I was always taking care of ourselves. But when we were in 8th grade, my mother got this brilliant idea of having us cut apricots to earn money for school clothes. And so my cousins were doing it, so why not us? And it was just during apricot season, so it was only like a month. And so we did. She took us down to Fremont and showed us where to go. And it was in a barn. Lots of people were there, and they had these long trays that were like maybe about 2.5, 2 inches deep, and about 5 to 6 feet long, about 3.5 to 4 feet wide. These thin trays. They would take a box of apricots, and that's how they charged you, by the box. They would dump the apricots onto the tray, and they roll all the way down, and there'd be a little metal bucket there where we'd cut the apricots, we'd take the pit out or the seed and put it inside the container. You take they use these knives. These knives were lethal. I don't know whoever invented this thing, but wow. It was a short handled knife, had a severe curve in it, really sharply pointed. You would take the apricot, and you know that seam that runs down it, you'd stab it and you'd curve it around, and you would twist the apricot, take out the seed and put the two halves on the tray, and you'd fill up the tray. When you filled up the tray, they gave you a new tray and dump more apricots on that. So it got to be where they would get stacked. And so they would be so high that we couldn't safely put the apricots clear across the tray. So we got on boxes. So when we were 2 boxes high, then they came and they would take the trays and put them out in the sun to dry. Well, but by the end of the season, we all got really good at cutting apricots. And everybody is laughing, and making jokes on the other family tables. But my mom was like, get to work, don't talk, get to work faster. So we would not say anything, we're just busy cutting apricots. Well, one day I picked up an apricot, and it was really super ripe. And I knew that when I stabbed it, I didn't have to stab it very hard because it would slice right up and all. Well, I did, and the juice got all over my hands. So the next apricot I picked up was hard, and I knew, oh man, I really got to stab this thing. So I did. I found a seam, and I stabbed it, and I whipped it around, and the juice made it slippery, and my knife skipped, and I realized that I cut myself. And I thought, oh God, that millionth of a second when no blood is showing, you're thinking, oh, it's all right, I didn't do such a bad job. Then the blood started coming out, and I grabbed my hand, and I looked, and I didn't know what to do. And my mother, who happened to be across from me, said something that I will never forget as long as I live. She said, don't bleed on the apricots. And I grabbed my hand and I took it away from the table, and I didn't know what to do. And someone, I don't know, it was my mom or my sister maybe, she goes, go wash it off, because my hands were full of apricot juice. And I grabbed it and I jumped off the box, and I walked over to the spigot. There was a hose there, and I'm thinking, what do I do? I mean, it's bleeding, and I didn't know what to do. And this lady, I don't know who she was, where she came from. She put her arm around me, around my shoulders, and she turned on the water, and she washed my hands, and she got them all. She put soap on it, and she was scrubbing it, and she pushed really hard down on my cut, and it stopped bleeding. And she just said things to me like, you're gonna be all right, it won't bleed for long, it's okay. And she brushed back my hair. No one had ever done that before in my entire life. And she kept just saying, it's gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay. And she cleaned me up. She put a Band-Aid on it, and I was stunned. And then she's gone. I have no idea who she was or what. Why she came to help me, I don't know. But I walked back and I climbed back on top of my box and I picked up my knife to start cutting apricots again. And I looked at my mother and I thought, man, my mom would make a lousy nurse. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a memory.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing that with all of us. I know that for me, I will never look at how do you call it, an apricot? I'll never look at an apricot the same ever again. Thank you so much. So I have to just move some windows over on all of a sudden. Every time the host asks to spotlight you, they put up a little label and then it covers over what you're supposed to talk about if you're the MC. So let me just move these boxes away so I can bring up the intro for our next storyteller. One of the beauties of Zoom is that we get to meet storytellers from all over. And our next storyteller is actually Zooming to us from Arizona. Is that amazing or what? Anne Marie Trester has been telling stories since she first realized as a kid that it could get her a later bedtime. And on stage, she started telling stories in 2008 with Story District in Washington, D.C., Better Said Than Done in Virginia, and Story in San Francisco, and the Tellers of Tales in Tucson. When I asked her about what she has learned since COVID, she said she learned how to make red wine cake. Whoa, that sounds amazing. I hope that I'll have an opportunity someday to taste that cake in person. Please help me welcome Anna Marie, who is going to be telling a story titled Kindness in Danger.
Thanks, Karen. It's not the phone call you want to receive. Well, the doctor saw something on your mammogram and she didn't like it. So she wants you to come in and we're going to do the magnification with the 3D. Well, but I'd been through this before and I knew the stats. 10% of women get this call back. Of those, 1 to 2%, only 1 to 2% end up getting a biopsy. Of those, most of them are benign. I just moved here to Tucson and I knew this doctor wanted to show me that she was on top of things, and I get it. But it doesn't mean that that phone call isn't scary. So what a difference, instead of getting that call at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday and the person going through all the information so quickly that my brain doesn't have a chance to catch up with my ears and leaving me to stew all weekend long. I mean, I have an active imagination. I can do a lot with a phone call like that over the course of 72 hours. This person says, hey, this is probably not the phone call that you wanted to receive today. I'm probably the last person you wanted to talk to right now. But I want you to know that whatever you're feeling, it's okay. And we're going to be here. We're going to get you through this. So what questions do you have? And she listened to me. I mean, it was just so kind. And they must have been that kind when I went in for my first mammogram, but I wasn't paying attention. So when I went back for the zoomed in 3D special mammogram, this time I paid attention. And I noticed that they had a Ben's Bell hanging behind the desk. So here in Tucson, Ben's Bells is a nonprofit that teaches the impacts of intentional kindness and inspires people to practice kindness as a way of life. That's their mission statement. And these little bells are just such a brilliant strategy, because you see a bell and you ask someone for the story, and the storyteller gets to remember a time that they were kind. The listener gets to hear and be reminded about kindness, and anyone who happens to overhear it or see the bell in the first place gets to remember that kindness is a choice. It's a practice. It's something that we all are responsible for. And Ben's Bells has been transforming the landscape of this community since 1999, when they first started. An organization that does kindness training with them gets a mosaic. There's one in my hairdresser's. There's one in the hospital. They're all over the hospital. There's one in the school that I pass every single day. And there's thousands of bumper stickers. Like, and I can't think of a time that you more need to be reminded to be kind than when there's a bumper, like right here. So I asked these women at Tucson Medical Center Breast Center, is that a Ben's bell? And it turns out it wasn't theirs, it was their colleagues, but they told me the story. And I noticed they were making one another laugh as they were telling the story. They were listening to one another. They were really enjoying completing each other's thoughts. And I realized this is a team that really, like, they're at the top of their game. You can almost hear them collaborating. And I am so glad that I had them at my back, because this time my test didn't end up being nothing. And I'm so glad that I had a doctor that had to prove herself and double check. And when I went back over the course of weeks and months, I realized that these women deserve their own Ben's bell. So I nominated them for this process where you receive this bell, and then if they win, I get interviewed on the radio, and I will tell this story, that it was the morning when I was about to have a procedure in about 4 hours, and I had a question that was just making me anxious. And instead of being told, like, just wait, just be patient, like, you're going to be here in 4 hours anyway, like, just leave us alone. Instead, they tell me, hold on. Kathy keeps me on hold. She sends her colleague to go down the hall and wait at the door where Dr. Viscusi is making her rounds. And she's going to grab her in the hallway in the few seconds that she's going to pass from one patient visit to another. She didn't have any time that morning, but they knew they could catch her, and this question would be a matter of 15 seconds. You know, and Kathy's telling me on the phone, like, look, your job today is to heal. And healing before a procedure, we call that prehab. And it's way more important than healing that happens after a procedure. We call that rehab. And if we can help you spend 3 calmer hours right now before your procedure, like, we are so happy to do that for you. And I'm so glad. And I hope that I get to tell that story on the radio. But in the meantime, I thought I'd tell it to you all to remind you that kindness is something that we all have benefited from in our lives, and it's something that we all can practice. And as storyteller, it reminds me that I have received some uncommon kindness this year, and it's my job to foster and continue it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna Marie, for reminding us of what's really important. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say Ben's bells?
Ben's bells. So you
So-
receive a bell, like your bell. It looks
So
just like that.
I'm going to ring my bells right here. And maybe we can just take a moment to think about how important kindness is in the world. There really isn't anything else that's as important as being kind, in my opinion. And I want to thank you for that reminder. Our next storyteller, Audrey Kopp, kept community storytellers going for many, many years when many of us either moved away, in my situation, had kids and could no longer get out in the evening. And Audrey was a force that kept the organization going. We actually celebrated our 40th birthday just this past month. Audrey said, having immersed myself in folk and fairy tales when I was quite young, it was wonderful when I learned that I could share them with others after I grew up. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about Audrey is that she is so young at heart. She said, that one of the things that she learned during COVID is how to use the Santa Monica Big Blue Bus. And so without further delay, please help me welcome Audrey Kopp telling Little Turtle and Coyote.
Thank you, Karen. By the way, that what you said about 40 years, I don't think referred to me. I think it meant community storytellers.
Correct, community storytellers. We celebrated, community
Right.
storytellers celebrated 40
Right.
years.
Yeah. The story that I'm going to be telling you is one that's told all over the world with slight variations depending on the country or the place that it came from. Well, I found a version of the story in a book by Joe Hayes, a storyteller from New Mexico. And I decided that I would tell my version of Joe Hayes' version of this story that's told around the world. One day, Little Turtle's mother said to him, "Now, you be ready tomorrow because all the turtles are going to be coming out of the river and we're going up onto the land because now is the time where there are wonderful, fresh, green cactus shoots and they'll be delicious. So you just follow me when the line starts going up the bank tomorrow." And Little Turtle got excited. And indeed, the next morning, there they were, all the turtles going up the bank from the river and onto the land. Little Turtle couldn't believe what he saw. It was wonderful. There were flowers whose colors he'd never ever seen. And oh my goodness, look, there was that little rock. It was a little rock and it had red stripes and white stripes on it. It was wonderful. Little Turtle's mother turned around, looked for Little Turtle, and she yelled at him, "Little Turtle, you've got to go faster. You're the last one. Hurry up." And so the line kept moving, but Little Turtle kept finding all these wonderful, wonderful new sights to see. And it was just a joy. And then he decided he better look up and see his mother. But he didn't see his mother. He didn't see any of the other turtles. And so he began to cry. And while Little Turtle was crying, Coyote happened to come along. Now, Little Turtle's mother had told him about Coyote and the ways that you could deal with him in case Coyote was trying to do some funny tricks or something. Well, again, there was Little Turtle going, and Coyote stopped and listened. And then he said, Little Turtle, teach me that song you're singing." "I'm not singing, I'm crying." Little Turtle, you teach me that song you're singing." "I'm not singing, I'm crying." Little Turtle, unless you teach me that song, I'm just going to swallow you." Well, Little Turtle remembered some things his mother had told him. And Little Turtle said to Coyote, If you swallow me, I'm just going to run around inside your stomach and you won't be well anymore." Coyote said, "I don't believe a word that you're saying. I'm going to throw you against that rock that's over there." "Oh, if you throw me against that rock will break." "What do you mean that rock will break?" And Coyote reached over and he touched Little Turtle on his shell and he saw how hard Little Turtle's shell really was. "No, I won't throw you against that rock, but I'll think of something else." "Well," said Little Turtle, "you know, my mother said there is one thing that I really don't like." "Ooh," said Coyote. "Ooh, let me see if I can think of it. I know I'll call Mountain Lion and he'll take you by his claws and rip you apart. And if he tries that, Little Turtle said, if he really tries that, his claws are going to be ripped apart by me. Ooh, said Coyote. Huh, I know. I will call Bear. And Bear has these wonderful, wonderful teeth, and they'll eat anything, especially you. And if he tries to eat me, well, then I'm just going to chop his teeth off, because once they land on me, they're going to just blow away. Well, what is it that your mother has said? My mother has said that I shouldn't go back to that cold, cold river, because she knows I really like that coldness of the river. No, what am I saying? I don't like that coldness of the river. I like it better out here. Really? Said Coyote. Really? And so he scooped up Little Turtle, held him in his mouth, and ran all the way back to that river and threw in Little Turtle. Little Turtle paddled away from the bank and looked up and said, ha, 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 ha. I love being in the cold river. That's where I've lived my whole life. And thank you very much for carrying me back here. Coyote walked along a little bit after he heard this, and then he opened his mouth. There was a raven sitting in a nearby tree, and the raven said, "Oh, Coyote, that's a beautiful song you're singing. Teach it to me." "I'm not singing, I'm crying. Can't you tell the difference?" And that's the story.
Thank you, Audrey. I love any story having to do with turtles. Actually, I'm looking out my window right now. It's dark. My turtles are hibernating in my backyard. Actually, Janice Kelly is here, who's a nature detective, knows all about nature. So she would correct me and say, turtles don't hibernate, they brumate. My turtles are brumating right now in my backyard because it is winter. And if they were to hear that story, they would probably go, whoa, as well. Thank you, Audrey.
Karen, thank you for telling about turtles.
Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome another storyteller from the North, from the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild. Cynthia Restivo has been telling stories professionally since 1993, and she thanks her elders for paving this wonderfully creative path. She said during COVID, she learned how to use Google Slides. She learned how to cook with people all around the world, crochet, and this is amazing. She completed a master's degree in communication and storytelling. That's called using your COVID time wisely. So please help me welcome Cynthia telling the story, Mr. Restivo.
All right. Well, a name tells you a lot. If adults called my husband Rick or Goomba, well, that's what most people called him. His family called him Ruchitso. And but if someone 45 years old or younger called him Mr. Restivo, I knew, and he knew, that likely they were one of 1,000 of his students that he had over a 40-year career as a music teacher. Now, it was in the fluorescent lights of the ICU room the day before he died
in April of 2017. He was in and out of consciousness that day. And Dr. Mahmoudi said in his beautifully warm Iranian accent that he would try to get back by the room to check in on Rick before the end of the day. And the nurse, Julie, said, wouldn't Rick want some music playing in the background, him being a musician and all? And I cringed. No, that is the last thing he would want, being a musician. He thinks music should be live and center stage. Having music playing in the background, that would be like torture without being able to change the channel. The respiratory therapist came in and out of the room, tearing open the plastic packages of tubing, letting their fingers dance across the computer keys and adjusting the beeps on the machines. I would check in on their kids, or I would find out how their house repairs were going, or what they did on their day off. But on this day, there was a new respiratory therapist by the name of Jennifer. She had a sturdy body and sensible brown shoes. She pulled her hair back so it wouldn't get in her way. And she didn't even look at me. She didn't talk to me. Her fingers were dancing across the keys and she was adjusting the beep. She had torn open the packaging, and then she said that I would have to go into the family room because she had some kind of specialized procedure that she needed to do, and that it would be better if I waited elsewhere. Well, she hadn't made eye contact with me. She didn't tell me really why I couldn't be there. And so I kind of dug my heels in and I said, no, I'm staying by my husband's side. And she looked up at me, kind of hurt and surprised. And she said, oh, don't worry. I'll take good care of Mr. Restivo. Mr. Restivo? Are you an ex-student of his? And she smiled like she had just gotten caught. And she said, well, yeah, I played trumpet in 8th grade. And I asked, do you still play? It's what he would want to know. And she said, nah. You know, we moved around a lot. And when I got to the high school, they didn't have a very good music program. And you know, I got busy and, you know, well, I still have the trumpet though. I'm going to give it to my boy when he's old enough to join the band. And I said, oh, all right. Well, Jennifer, I have one question before I go into the family room. And she looked at me and said, what? And I said, did he give you an A? And she closed her eyes and nodded. And when she opened her eyes, there was moisture in her eyes. And I kind of looked across the bed at her curious like. And when she said, Mr. Restivo, his classroom, it was the only place I felt safe in 8th grade. He would let me come into his classroom before school, during lunch, during recess, after school. And he even had a little desk set up in the side of the band room where I could do my homework so I wouldn't have to go home so soon. He used to tell me, don't let the bastards get you down. He probably shouldn't have said that. But hell, I was in 8th grade and I heard a heck of a lot worse at home. No, it is an honor to care for Mr. Restivo when he is at his most vulnerable. Because I'll tell you, he took care of me when I was. And you know, she looked small. She looked small, like she might just fold underneath the weight of her memories. And so I went around that bed and I walked over to her and I gave her a hug, like you would to a child that just woke up from a bad dream. But somewhere in the middle of that hug, I realized that she was holding me in the middle of my nightmare. And I then took a step back and I said, Rick, you're safe. Jennifer's here. She's taking care of you. And I bent down and I kissed him on the forehead. And I walked to the door. And when I got to the door, I turned back and I said, Jennifer, playing a trumpet's a lot like riding a bike. At first, when you pick it up again, the notes are kind of wobbly and the notes may not sound so sweet. But if you keep playing, pretty soon those notes are gonna soar out of that horn. It just takes 5 minutes a day. And she threw her head back and she laughed, a laugh that filled the whole room. And she said, I forgot that. He used to say that when we would mess up in rehearsal. He would take his baton and bang it on the music stand and say, I'm not asking for 30 minutes a day. I'm just asking for 5. Give me 5. She turned away from me. Her laughter slowed to a chuckle. And she looked at her teacher and said, all right, Mr. Restivo, when I get home from work today, I'll take out that trumpet and I'll give you 5. You're right. Anyone can give 5. Thank you.
Oh, Cynthia, your story is so beautiful about how the world works in such incredible ways to bring circle stories into our lives, about how we can give and then receive from those we give to. And what a blessing that you were able to witness that circle and share the story with all of us today. Thank you. And now I would like to welcome a storyteller that I've had the privilege to meet since COVID. Not a storyteller that I've known for 30 years, but a storyteller that I've known because of COVID and because Community Storytellers has gone online. Boniface Boateng says that he has physically traveled to, and I'm probably going to say this wrong and you'll have to correct me, El Kebulan, which he says is the ancient name for Africa. Did I say it right?
Hopefully, okay.
North America, Europe, Asia, and digitally he has traveled to other countries only to learn that what he was looking for he had within himself all the time. When I asked him what he's learned since COVID, he said that despite the sobering fact of over 700,000 fellow countrymen dead from COVID, liars and deniers of all sorts abound. So he says he has perfected the skill of disagreeing without being disagreeable. Please help me welcome Boniface telling something old, something new, something a poet said.
Thank you, Karen. It's been said that peace is not something that comes from somewhere. It's actually a gift we give to one another. So how are we doing? My story has something old, something new, and something a poet said, all with a bearing on peace. Something old. Back in the day when Rome ruled the world, that was hundreds of years ago, there was a rebellion in one of the territories. So a general was sent there to bring order. He shows up with his troops, And in a very short time, sadly, just about every man, woman, and child was put to the sword. Slaughter. One of his soldiers, looking at the horrific carnage, remarked, "Solitudinem faciunt pacem appellant." Solitudinem faciunt pacem appellant. Translated from the Latin, it means they create desolation and call it peace. They create desolation and call it peace. That's something old. Now, here's something new. About a couple of years ago, I caught the late afternoon newscast on national television. And the host says, "I'm going to show you a video clip. I will make no comments, but you, the viewer, can make of it what you will." So he shows the video clip, and there's this peace officer, a policeman, who has stopped a vehicle, and he walks up to the vehicle and asks for license and registration. But the driver, a lady, has her hands up in the air. And she says, "Well, it's in my bag and I can't get to it with my hands up." And he says, "Well, put your hands down and get them for me." And she says, "Well, I'm afraid to, because I know policemen have been shooting drivers when their hands are down." The policeman is amused. He chuckles and says to the lady, "You don't have to worry about that. We only shoot Black people." This was on national television. And as the host said, you make up the story of what you will. While you're doing that, here's something a poet said that may have some bearing on this subject. The poet's name is Walt Whitman, lived in the 1800s, I understand, and he wrote a poem entitled "To You." To you. Here are just a few lines from that poem. "Oh, I could sing such grandeurs and glories about you. You have not known what you are. You have slumbered all your life. Your eyelids have been the same as closed most of the time. Whoever you are, claim your own at any hazard. These shows of the East and West are tame compared to you. These immense meadows, these interminable rivers, you are as immense and interminable as they." Walt Whitman, a few lines from his poem, "To You." So lying dormant in each of us is this beautiful, this magnificent potential, this capacity that sages and illuminates like Walt Whitman can clearly see. When we choose to grab or grasp and unfold this capacity, imagine what astounding, glorious gifts like peace we could give to one another. And after all this time, does this world deserve such magnificent people as you and I could be? I think so. So let's get to it. That's it.
Thank you, Boniface, for your ever-present wisdom. You bless us at every meeting with your incredible poetry and wisdom, and I want to thank you for that. So we have now reached the end of our journey, and I'm seeing that it's 6 o'clock. I had one very short story I wanted to share with you, but I want to make sure that you all are okay with me sharing. It's a 4-minute story. Is that okay? Is everybody okay? All right. Okay. So I would like to share this story with you, and I'd like to dedicate this story to Mr. Restivo, because music has been my guiding light in my life. And this story is a story that I have ended every performance that I've done since the beginning of COVID, whether it's a performance for children that are 5 or really cool high school students that are 18 or adults or seniors. I end every show with this particular story. For me, this is my go-to COVID story, and it is also about the power of music. So for those of you who have learned some new cooking recipes during COVID, take out your potato and your grater, because we're going to get grating. I've made lots of soup during COVID. I've learned how to make sourdough bread. I make a mean challah, never did before COVID. I've learned how to make pita bread. I've learned how to make Indian food. Let's take out a potato. Here we go. We're going to grate the potato like that. Actually, not grate it. We're going to take off the skin of the potato. All right. And we're going to put that into a bucket called slops, like this. We're going to take out a carrot. We're going to scrape it. And we're going to put the part you don't eat into a bucket called slops. We're going to take out an onion. We're going to scrape it. We're going to put the part you don't eat into a bucket called slops. And so it was. Every day, the family cooked together. And after supper, Mother would take the bucket. She would open the door to the house. She'd take 3 steps outside, 1, 2, 3, and she'd throw the slop bucket outside of her house like this, slosh. And then she would go into her house and she would do something she absolutely adored. And that is, she would take out her saxophone and she would play a little melody. And everyone, her kids, her husband, they would all get up and start dancing. So if you like, you can get up and dance with me. Next day, potato, slops, carrot, slops, onion, slops. After supper, 1, 2, 3, slosh, stop. Who said that? I don't see anyone around here. She went back to the house and she put on her saxophone. Next day, potato, slops, carrot, slops, onion, slops, 1, 2, 3, slosh, stop. Who said that? Me. Look down at your feet. She looked down at her feet, and there was this wee little man about yay tall, had a long beard. He was not happy. He looked up at her and he said, "You're not a very good neighbor. You throw your slops on my house every day." Really? Yes, look. You're right. Potato, carrots, onion all over your house. It's not very nice. You didn't even know I was here, and I've been living here all along. You should put your slops in the garbage or in a composter, even better. You know, you play music and so do I. Really? Yes, I even play the saxophone. Wait. And the little man went into his house. And when he came back, he started playing some music. Next day, potato, slops, carrot, slops, onion, slops, wait, composter bin, slosh, 1, 2, 3. Hey neighbor, I was wondering, would you like to play some music with me? I'd love to. Thank you so much for putting your slops in the garbage or in the composter. Thank you for being such a good neighbor. You know, I haven't been able to leave my house in a very long time. And now I can look outside my windows and see the world. And maybe even play music with you. Wait! Hey, thanks for being such a great neighbor. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for being such amazing, wonderful listeners. I see so many friends in this Zoom audience, and I want to thank Colleen and Dana. If you're here, why don't you unmute yourselves, show yourselves on camera. I want to thank you for helping to put together this incredible concert. I'd like to thank the Storytelling Association of California, National Storytelling Network. The main thing for all of you is to keep telling stories, because stories are what glue us together. It glues us with our past, it glues us with our present, and it will glue us to our future. So please keep sharing those stories around your fire. Share the stories with anyone who will listen. And I hope that you will be able to join us at Community Storytellers. Would someone from the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild like to unmute and say how folks can join you as well?
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to add. Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Nunn. I'm the co-chair of the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild with Dana Gross. And Karen, thank you so much for hosting our Tellabration this year. We couldn't.
My pleasure.
It's what a lovely collaboration we've had for 2 years now between the Community Storytellers of Los Angeles and the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild in the Tuolumne Calaveras County region up near Yosemite. And everyone is welcome to please go to motherlodestorytelling.com to learn more about the Mother Lode Storytelling Guild. And Karen, do you want to say your website? It's all in the chat also. If anybody.
Yes, I've put our link to our next meeting, which is next Sunday. You can come and share a story with us. We're a friendly group, and many of our community storytellers are here today, also listening. And we generally meet the third or the fourth Sunday of the month. And you can always find us on Meetup. We announce our meetings there. You can join our Community Storytellers group by looking at our website, communitystorytellers.org. And I hope to see you next week.
Thank you to all of our tellers, and happy Tellabration, everyone.
Happy Tellabration, everyone. Thank you to all the amazing tellers for your incredible stories. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Have a nice